welcome to the Perfect Lap Podcast, a podcast for all the time attackers out there. This is where we're going to talk about anything and everything time attack related, from our history to what's going on at current events. We're going to do breakdowns of events that have occurred, and we're just going to talk about the drivers, the organizations, and everything in between. We just want to get in and get involved with time attack and get it to be something that you can enjoy as you, a lover of time attack, are absolutely involved with. All right, I'm here with Mark Kilgore, myself, Mark Jager. He's going to go by Kilgore. I'm going to go by Jager. Let's make it easy. All right, Kilgore. So we finally met up at COTA. I had to do a brief little video about you in previous times where I was introducing you to the GTA family for COTA. But now we're on a podcast together. I don't even know how that happened, but we're going to talk about it. We're going to see how it got there. And basically, give me your impressions. What do we end up doing? How do we get here?
Yeah, man, it is good to be here, Jager. It's quite crazy to think that, like, earlier this year, that was March of this year, right, that we met, and now, some 5 months later, we've decided to start a podcast about all things time attack, and I'm excited. I am super excited. What's really interesting is how you and I were both sort of doing the same thing. We were both having the same thoughts, but we didn't share those with each other until much later, and we were both like, oh, you want to start like a podcast? I'm interested in starting a podcast. Maybe we should start a podcast together, right? Like, that's pretty much how this all got started. But also because I was interested, right? Like, I was looking for podcasts. I was looking for, like, YouTube channels. There's just not much time attack content out there specifically geared towards time attack.
Oh,
and
I
so
couldn't agree more. That's
it was something that we
that's
both
really hard to find.
Yeah, we both thought it was missing, and we said, you know what? Like, we should, if someone's going to do it, why not let it be us? And so here we are, episode number 1, officially happening. I'm excited.
In the books. Yeah, and that's what it is, right? We have a passion for time attack. We're very interested, and I couldn't agree more. It's so difficult to find any information about time attack in general. Obviously, a lot of the drivers are putting out, content specific to them, but there's not a news outlet. There's not anything that's really like coming out there and saying, this is time attack, this is what it is. I will give a lot of credit to like Time Attack News. They absolutely put out a lot of good content. That's great, but it's not something that's coming at you kind of live or anything like that in terms of, people just talking about it freely. And as me and you both know, what we want to do is we want to talk to the drivers. We want to talk to the organizations. We want to talk history. We want to talk about anything and everything time attack related as a whole. So let's kind of start this off, as basic as we can be. So how did you get into time attack?
Yeah, good question, Jager. So I got into time attack through the SCCA, which I get. People may not necessarily agree that is time attack, but I got in through the SCCA, as many people do who start or who have an interest in getting on track. They first start in autocross. So it was probably like around 2008, 2009, I got into autocross, and actually even before that, so we'll back up a little bit before that, this really was something that me and my brother got into. So he and I have sort of ventured through this journey together. And he had a couple of buddies that he went to college with. They were engineers, and shortly after they got done with college, this was about 2006, 2007, they were coming to a local racetrack. So they were coming to Barber Motorsports Park, which I'm from Birmingham, Alabama. It's where I grew up. And they were coming by there, and they said, hey, we're doing this new race series. It's called Specky 30. My brother and I had no idea what that was. And they said, you guys should come out, like, come hang out with us for the weekend. So we went out there, and we see these guys, like, racing around these old BMW E30s, right? So, like, 325s. It's a spec class. And that was sort of the first indication to us that, like, hey, you can get into racing, and it doesn't cost a ton of money, right? Like, you can buy a car for $1,000, maybe $2,000, and you can start racing it. And so that was sort of how we got started. That's how I got started. We ended up buying two red E30s. One was a 1988, one was a 1989. They were 325i's, and we started doing autocross. And then within like 1 or 2 years, we said, okay, like now we want to start doing track days. And so since we were already involved in the SCCA, we moved from there basically up to some of their SCCA track days. Being in the Southeast Division meant that we had a large number of tracks that were around us that provided us the opportunity. Barber, Road Atlanta were easy ones that to be able to get to. There's also one in Talladega, so it's called Talladega Grand Prix Raceway. It's not associated with the Speedway, but it's actually a very small club track. It's sort of in the middle of a field. It's in some ways, if you want to think about like Gingerman, CMP, maybe even Button Willow to a degree, right? Like it's a small track. It's not a pro track by any means, but it was very cheap to rent, and so a lot of people rented that out, and that's where we sort of first got our start on track and doing time trials. SCCA refers to them as time trials, and so we ended up building up both of the E30s. And that
How
was
the
really
competition there.
So it actually turned out to be very fun, but that's simply because of the people that were in our class.
As it usually comes out to.
As it usually does. As with most things, a lot of people have a gripe with SCCA, which is that they have too many classes, and I don't necessarily Trophy for all. I don't necessarily discount that, but that also means that people actually want to come out because they can be competitive. People at the same time, people don't want to come out. Many people don't want to come out, and they want to be in a field where their car is not competitive, and it never will be competitive. So look, I've run with SECA and Grid Life and Global Time Attack, and I can appreciate the goals of each of those organizations and how they go about doing it. So for the most part, we were running in this class called Street Unlimited, which none of the cars were actually built to any sort of unlimited, to the unlimited scope at which you could. But we had our E30s. We had a guy who was running an E36. We had a few other cars that were mildly modified. But the nice thing is that you could gut the cars, you could put a cage in it, and you could throw other things onto the car. We had some aero, things like that, and so it was a super fun class. But you definitely had other classes where, you would have one or two participants spread across, 10 or 15 classes, and it is what it is. I mean, I understand. It is a gripe with the SCCA. I don't disagree.
I think we've all been to a competition where literally you're talking about the amount of people set up in the competition are so minimal that basically if you just enter, you're going to get a trophy. I mean, there's always a time, but, like you said, I know a lot of people do have a lot of gripes. I mean, my gripe so far with your story is just simply that you did autocross ever. I mean, I just don't even understand the parking lot madness. A lot of guys love it. I understand it, but I live in SoCal, and hot dog, there's a lot of tracks about, so I just don't see a point in hanging out in the parking lot. But go on, sir.
I get it. No, I do. I'm very glad. I mean, I'm very appreciative that I did do autocross. Of course, that's a great way for people to get involved and start learning car control without being at high speeds on track. So that is a very good option to get involved. And I'm glad that I did go that way. But I especially nowadays, I mean, autocross, I haven't done one in a couple years. But you kind of go back to it after you kind of really get involved in, in being, at like Time Attack or, just on track in general. And you're kind of like, man, the thought of having to go stand around in a parking lot and then like get maybe 3 or 5 runs, like through a day, like kind of.
How much time do you spend on a run?
Yeah, right. You're 30 seconds to a minute, right? Like, and so you're kind of like, there's
It has its
and this
place.
is
It's
nothing.
good. Yeah.
It does. It absolutely does. And this is nothing to take away from the guys who enjoy it, the guys and girls who enjoy it. I absolutely understand why they enjoy it. They enjoy the competition, and nothing wrong with that. Everyone has things that they like. So at the same time, people kind of say, like club racers, right? Like wheel to wheel racers are like those time attack guys. Like I just don't get it, right? Like you just go out
Nope.
there for like 1 or 2 laps, right? And it's like, yeah, but
You,
I don't care to wheel race because I don't want my car getting, banged up on the first corner of the first lap, and then I'm done for the weekend, right? Like
yeah. I mean,
everyone has something that they like.
yeah, it's the age old thing of, time attack guys spend tons of money. People can say all they want, like it's a cheap sport. No, it's not a cheap sport. If you're trying to win, time attack is egregiously expensive. But without a doubt, it is one of those things where, at the end of the day, you're out there for that one perfect lap type situation. You could do one lap for the entire weekend and win the whole event,
Yeah.
which is kind of interesting all within itself. But that's just what it is. Yeah, like you
Yeah.
said,
No, absolutely.
everybody has their time and place.
Yeah. And,
By the way,
I,
paint us a picture of this E30 that you ran. What it look like? Because my
yeah.
immediate head is like stripped out cage, a seat, a bucket seat, clapped as shit. Like that. That is immediately my
Oh,
thought.
yeah. No, no. So we both had. So what was funny is that my brother first got his. It was a red E30. And then within like maybe 8 or 10 months, I think I had found another one and picked it up. And so we both had red E30s. Ultimately, we did strip them out. We put a cage in them. Um, and so both of us had. So we both had like we they weren't carbon hoods, but we both had like painted the hood black, and we had a red. Um, if you're familiar with, so people who are like BMW bros, they will understand when I say like it has a TII stripe, which is basically like a thin stripe and then a thinner stripe on the hood. So we had black hoods with red stripes, and then my brother had a black flag along the side of his, and I had a silver flag along the side of mine. But we had fender flares on them. We were running like so. This is pretty crazy. Like right, that car stripped out. That car probably weighed somewhere around like 2,700 pounds, like super light. But we had I think ultimately by the end with the fender flares, we were running 17-inch tires with 255s, which that's a pretty hefty tire
Yeah.
on a car that weighs that much, and banging out all of like 180 horsepower, right? Like we didn't do any engine swaps or anything like that. It was still a fairly stock M20 that we had some headers on, we had like an intake. So those cars are OBD1. They're not even OBD2 cars. They're OBD1 cars. And so very like basically, and some people will probably understand this, there was no real tuning of that car. Like you could put a chip in it and that was it. Basically you had to open up the DME, you had to swap out a chip, and there was no like tuning it. You just put in the chip and you could get a little more power, right? Like it is not anything even close to what today is.
Yeah, it brings you back to my
And then
Honda days.
yeah, exactly. So we had, and then we got into doing like the, typical DIY garage aero. We bought some plywood. We bought some birch wood. Made splitters out of it. And then I was running a like an APR. I think it was like an APR, maybe like the GTC 200 or 300 wing on the
Oh,
back.
guarantee the 200. I guarantee
Yeah,
it's the 200.
probably. Yeah, yeah.
Maybe even put the
And
risers on it.
well, so we did. So we created our own risers, and we actually so I'd made like gotten a fiberglass trunk lid that had the like built-in CSL like duckbill type spoiler, and so we actually mounted the wing to the chassis. So we actually had like bracing that went down through
That's
like through the trunk to the chassis. And it was just we were just messing around, just having a good time. And the cars were okay. Gosh, I'm trying to think back and remember, like, especially back in the day. So I don't remember exactly when Barber was first built. Had to be early 2000s. But back then, back in the day, how many times are we going to say that on this podcast?
Yeah, a
Back in the
lot.
day, if you were under like 2 minutes, that was like a pretty quick car, right? Like you knew what you were doing. You were, that sort of indicated you were competent at driving. And I remember like the first couple times we sort of went out there with a car, we were getting down into like, the single 2 minutes, or like the 2 minute 202s, 205s, right? Like, kind of somewhere around in there. And I think eventually we ended up just below the 2 minute mark at like a 59 or a 58, which, again, by all standards these days is not very quick. So I
Standards have
currently have,
definitely changed at every
yes, I
racetrack exponentially.
exactly. I currently have a 2015 BMW M4, which I was running, which is very mildly modified. When the last time I ran there, basically suspension and some tires, and I ran a 137. Right, so
Wow.
like
Wow. That's a difference.
yeah, yeah. So quite different. But yeah, I mean, it was awesome. I mean, that was really the car that like we learned to wrench on. We had probably taken every bolt off that car. We had taken everything out. For my brother's car, we had rebuilt the engine, which was a lot of fun. And so, we learned just a ton on how to wrench on those cars, which I think is why they were so popular back in the day. Now they've
Oh,
gotten
absolutely.
obscenely expensive.
Yeah.
But they were fairly simple, and I think this is probably something that our viewers can relate to a lot, and probably how many of them got their start. Just like for you, early Hondas, right? Like pretty simple. You can work on them. You're not going to mess a lot up. You don't need a computer system to figure out what's going on with the car.
Specialized
Um,
computer system.
well, yeah, exactly, yeah. And so that makes it super easy to work on them, and you just learn, right? And with that car, we also were very iterative in how we progressed, right? Like, we would throw some springs on stock dampers. And then from there, we threw, some Bilstein dampers on, with the lowering springs. And eventually we went to coilovers, right?
Yeah,
And then
you
eventually
got to
maybe going to a,
learn with the car.
exactly,
You got to
exactly.
see the progression. You got to really understand what each of these modifications did to the car. And I'm sure, like you said, with like the wing and stuff like that, you got to see the effects of mounting it to the trunk and then eventually mounting it to the chassis mount. In fear, of probably ripping out your fiberglass trunk and ripping that off. So after you got done autocrossing, you got done hanging out in parking lots. Where'd you go then? You started going to track days. You started doing SCCA. What made you really take that switch and flick it over and try something like Grid Life or GTA out?
Yeah. Well, I'll say the other thing that really got me into Time Attack was World Time Attack Challenge, right? I mean,
Oh,
that was something that when they started doing those live streams and watching those cars, like just totally mesmerized and enamored with those cars and everything that those guys were building, right? Like, I mean, I think for many people, a lot of those cars are hero cars, hero type cars. I mean, I think back to, and it's so funny now, especially going back to those early days. I mean, I think the one that really sticks out for me that I think was a real genesis of Time Attack and really like drawing me in was Nemo, the Evo, out there in Australia. Like that car, I just remember that thing and like looking at that and being like, God, like that thing is just so sick. It's got like all these wings and canards and it's like all carbon, right? Like I was just like, oh, like this is awesome. And I think that was around that time is really the genesis of that, like of what really drew me in and started to love Time Attack. And you also had like under Suzuki, right, who was building his S15. just to watch that process, because like that car's been very iterative as well, right? Like as well as just, I mean, in many ways, that is exactly what Time Attack is, right? Like it is just a constant step by step progression. People getting better, building better cars, technology flowing down from high level racing, now carbon, aerodynamics, things that used to be only at high levels are now being produced and put onto normal street type cars, if that's what you even want to call them. But I mean,
Always a
that's sort
sore
of the
subject
entire
with some
process.
people.
Well, yeah, sure, but I mean, that's sort of the entire process, and something that I liked and I appreciated. And
Yeah, it
so
was such an awesome event, and for it to be televised, to be in a way where you could watch it at any moment, and be able to check out that event. And the event was absolutely mind blowing. To be able to see all those cars, and obviously to see all those guys travel from Japan and Europe and stuff like that. That the guys that are coming in and bringing their cars in. Obviously, some
yep,
guys from America. But yeah, that was a huge event for people to actually be able to start watching Time Attack as a whole. And the cars were just so cool back then. I mean, I definitely get a little bit of that, oh man, back in the day was so much cooler aspects just because
little
the
nostalgia.
cars, yeah, the nostalgia of it all. Like the cars were so cool. And, I think one thing that's always very interesting about Time Attack is the one thing that I actually akin Time Attack to drifting in a sense is you gotta look cool doing it. Like
Yeah.
that is a huge thing for Time Attack. I actually just saw Boss Racing post today talking about non-livery car. Is it cool? And I'm like, nope, immediately not. Like if you're gonna be in Time Attack, you put a livery on the car. That is a huge differentiating factor, especially now in the world of everybody's got a Supra.
Oh,
You
right.
got to delineate your car from the other cars. So I need somebody, I need those guys to put liveries on their cars so it really stands out, sticks out, and makes me remember them. Because otherwise, you're just another silver Supra in the sea of Supras running around the track. And yes, they're fast, and that's amazing, but whatever, man. You got to look cool doing it.
Yeah.
That's
Oh yeah.
again, again, again.
Oh yeah. Well, and that's what I mean. Yeah, absolutely. And for people who are watching, the spectators, right? Like, I mean, you think about Ferris Kartumi's car, right? Like, his current one. I think he's got like three of them, but like his current one, right? Like you think of that very particular carbon Kevlar, this sort of yellow, and then he's got the Momo on the side, right? Like
Yep.
that is something that is very distinctive, and I think like you said, it's important.
I
Once you
actually think
throw
it's
some
interesting
stickers on
if
the
you go
car,
when you go way back. Ferris actually had a livery on the car, and the livery lives on in the interior of the older Corvette. It lives in the interior of the Corvette where he had like a different livery, I believe, which is kind of cool. Again, like you said, with the carbon Kevlar and the Momo and the yellow, like I absolutely believe that he's got to continue to evolve his car to make sure that it's something that stands out. It's obvious that he's amazingly fast and just awesome. But I also want it to be a car that I want that picture on my wall. I want it to
yeah.
be that awesome and cool. So,
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely, yeah. So kind of getting back to so I guess there were two aspects that really drew me into Time Attack. One, my own racing. We started doing track days, but as and I do not judge anyone who wants to just get out on track. They want to go to track days and they enjoy it, and by all means, right? Like if that's what you love to do, then do it. The thing for me was just that there was this like sort of missing element of competition. You have all these other guys who are out there in their cars. They're running the same track. I want to know like where I am, right? Like, am I faster? Am I slower? Especially in a car that has like 180 horsepower versus maybe a car that has more horsepower, less horsepower, right? A Miata. Where do I stack up? And so that was what really, of course, drew me into Time Attack. I like the competition aspect. I want to know where I stack up. And there's all there, and this is one thing, I just love about time attack. There are two aspects to me in terms of time attack from a participant driver standpoint. One is the car, and then two is the driver, and that's something that I really enjoy. I want to be able to build the best car that I can, even if I'm not the best driver. If I can build the best car, I might have a chance at winning. I also very much appreciate the guys who are incredible drivers. They had right. There's always the guy who he's a fast driver in a slow car, and he's setting he's setting laps on the track, and you're just like, I just don't even understand like how that's possible, right? Like,
Yeah.
total respect to that guy, right? But that sort of, to me, that is something that's so cool about time attack is I want to be able to build the best car that I can, and if I can build one of the fastest cars for my class, and I can be a reasonably competent driver in that, then I should be able to be competitive. And so there's sort of right there's those two aspects: one, building a fast car, and then two, being a fast driver. And those are both things that I can work on and continue to work on. And so that's something else to me that is super interesting about time attack. Like the spec classes for club racing and all that kind of stuff really doesn't that just doesn't resonate with me. I get that it resonates with other people, but it just doesn't resonate with me because I enjoy the build of the car. I want to see people building cars and taking different approaches, which you can totally do in time attack, right? You can have, you can be in a class where you're driving a fairly new Supra with some big aero and turbos and all that kind of stuff, and you can be setting blisteringly fast times. But you can also be the same guy who's, I don't know, let's say in some crappy old Subaru STI, who puts big wings on it, right, and builds a crazy motor and is also setting crazy fast times, right? Like there are so many ways to get to the goal of setting a fast time that's the other thing I love about time attack. I love being able to see what people do and how they go about doing it, and watching people as well as trying to do that myself. That's something that just really resonates with me in terms of time attack.
Well, yeah, and like you said, right? So, I mean, obviously, I think every one of us, most of us at least, started off HPDE type stuff. A lot of the guys have done that, and you start yardsticking, right? You start going, oh, that guy ran a 2-minute lap time. I'm at 2:01. I need to push a little harder. I want to be faster than him. Doesn't matter if he's driving a Corvette and you're driving a Miata. And when you're out on track too, the same thing holds, right? You're out there and you're kind of gauging yourself against other people. And back in the day when they actually, used to post all these things up on the windows of all the tracks that I went to, like we would walk up and you'd be, oh, Mark Kilgore. Who's Mark Kilgore? I got to go find out who this guy is, what kind of car he's driving if they didn't post it on there. And you started trying to hunt that person down to be like, what are you driving? What's going on? And you always walk over with those like odd intentions of like, hey, what's going on? What do you have done to this car? How much horsepower does, you're trying to gauge yourself and this, that, and the other. And I think I was in the same boat as you where I was going to the track and it was super fun and I was learning a lot and having a great time. But then I said, they started doing these competitions here and there. All-wheel drive competition or whatever the case it might be, and I'm like, I'll put my toes in there, I'll dabble a little bit, I'll get it wet, and then next thing you know, you're like, oh, well, they're doing this time attack event, and so you keep building and building and building, and that competition, just keeps breeding within you to continue to go faster and better. So, with your BMW now, tell us a little bit about what do you compete in? Where do you compete in? What are your goals with it?
Yeah. So I currently, as I said, have a 2015 BMW M4, and this is the first car that I specifically bought to run in a particular class or set of classes. I actually looked at the rules and said, okay, what sort of BMW can I buy that's going to be competitive?
BMW, huh?
I'm a BMW bro. Like I've had, this is my third one that I've taken on, that I track. I just like them. Not to say that I wouldn't buy others, but I don't know. Like it's just sort of, it's just sort of what I'm into. And they are good cars. And but something you said earlier, which again, like kind of that is also this is also something that is just another reason that I love Time Attack is I want to be able to. I don't want to just buy a car that's fast. Like if I buy a car and I'm just buying it just because it's fast, like I'm gonna lose interest in it kind of quickly. Like I want to be able to have a car that I actually look at and I'm like, oh man, I love that car. Like that is a good looking car. Now
The old walkway in
the
the parking lot, you got to be able to turn around and want to look at your car.
exactly. You're right. You're absolutely right. The downside to that is I may not be as aggressive on track because I'm also like, I don't want to wad this car up because I like it so much. Right? Like I get that. If you have no emotional attachment to the car, you can push it and if something happens, something happens. But to me, like if I have no emotional attachment to the car, I don't know, like
I'm
how
not
much
going
do I
to keep
really
the
want
car
to
very
drive it?
long.
Exactly, right?
That's
Yeah. And
flat out.
so
Like, I have to
yeah.
have that
So
emotional attachment to the car to want to keep it, to modify it, to spend my money, time, energy, all those
yeah.
things.
Yeah. Exactly. So I think that kind of goes back to your point of like to me the thing I love is I love having like a show car, not necessarily like a show quality car, but a car that actually looks good, right? Like it looks good. It looks a heck of a lot better than a lot of these wheel to wheel cars that are being held together by duct tape and rivets, right? Like I want the car to look good. I want it to look fast, and then you actually go out on track and it can back it up. I mean, that's something to me. Like when I see all of the time attack cars from years past and even to today and even to the what did it start out as is this super street super lap
Super
battle or
lap
something
battle.
like that.
Yep.
Yeah, super lap battle, right? Like that came from the SEMA cars then basically sticking around for another week and going out to Button Willow, right? You can kind of correct me, you're the SoCal guy, but right, like I mean it was show cars then going out to track, right? And that was again something that like I just really liked. I like being able to see these beautiful cars that were also functional, right? They had form, they had function, and it all added up to being fast on track. And
I
so
mean,
yeah, so
a big part of the Super Street, not to get too deep into it, we'll eventually dig really deep into that, but
yeah,
that
we'll
actually
we'll save that for
happened.
another episode.
Yeah, that happened at a later date where Jason started bringing those guys in. But Super
Okay.
Street Super Lap Battle used to be a invite only event that the magazines held, where they invited specific cars, drivers, teams, that really, they wanted quality, obviously, like you're saying, and so they were very good looking and just all out cars. But yeah, we'll talk about that at a later date.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So 2015 BMW M4 is what I'm driving right now. It is currently set up mostly with Grid Life Street GT in mind. So Grid Life Street GT is a fairly rule heavy class, and what I mean by that is it's fairly restricted in what you can do. There's no engine swaps. There's no aero. There's no aftermarket aero. You can only run aero that was provided by the OE manufacturer. So any sort of like
Which
dealer,
is
even like a
highly
dealer,
restrictive.
yeah, even like a dealer installed package or something like that, right? So basically, you can run a wing or any sort of front aero that came from the manufacturer, but that's it.
Yeah, that's pretty
Not
dang
not
restrictive
even
in the world of time
yeah,
attack.
very very
Yeah.
restrictive, and not even right, not even like the race car era, right? So like for my BMW M4, right, they have a GT4 version that is a homologated race car. Cannot run that aero. The best I can run is the aero that came on the GTS version of the car, which I mean it's something, but like the rear wing on my car is from the GTS, and I think it makes somewhere around like 160 or maybe 180 pounds of downforce at 180 miles an hour. So it's not doing much. With that
Yeah, I
being
think
said,
that was the one of the first things I said to you was why do you have such a small wing?
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, yeah. We were there in the Coda garages, and you're looking at the car, and you're like, I mean, I like that you have a wing on there, but man, that thing's small. Yeah, why is it such a small wing? Yeah.
But that's the
And my
struggle when you're running multiple series and the class
yeah,
rules are when they're so egregiously different. You either A, have to build a car where you can swap out wings and swap out splitters because it's aero
yep,
balance, not just throw aero parts on the car. So you're either going to do a lot of work to have to run multiple classes, or you're going to build to one rule set and just be willing to run in the other rule set at a disadvantage from a
yeah,
realistic perspective.
yeah. And that's sort of what I'm doing now. I built the car to Grid Life Street GT. It kind of fits in the middle between an SCCA tuner class and Global Time Attack's street class, right? So the car is not eligible for enthusiasts because it's an M version of the car. So M versions are automatically uprated to upclass to street and Global Time Attack. But I mean, it's still a capable car on track, and that's just a decision that you have to make. But I said, you know what? Really, the biggest thing was, okay, which of these organizations do I really want to run with? And a lot of that came down to I'm looking at the schedule and what tracks do I want to go to and what weekends make sense for me. And, Global Time Attack has now really gone to such a wide expanse of where the events are across the U.S. It just made it difficult. And I was like, there's no way that I can get to all these events, reasonably. So Global Time Attack is, that's kind of out. The SCCA, they have their time trial national tour, but they also go to a lot of events across the U.S. But the other thing is that there's no real like championship, right? Like you don't need to go to, 4 events or 5 events out of the 10 to be eligible for a championship. Really, they're going to hand out trophies at the Time Trial Nationals, which is one event in Bowling Green, Kentucky, which lucky enough for me is like an hour away from where I live here in Nashville. So, that I'm like, well, if I'm just going to build a car for one event, that doesn't really make a lot of sense.
It's really hard to build a car for one event, which again, I'll applaud the World Time Attack guys. They do that
Yeah,
all the time, but it is one of those things where I definitely go down that road of it's very difficult to build a car for one event a year.
yeah,
Like when I started building my car, my Subaru, I was lucky in the sense that I had 2 different event organizers that were doing tons of events in Southern California. I mean, I was doing 10, 12 events a year, time attack events. And that's not even accounting for like random competitions that I was randomly running in, which it's much easier to want to, build a car when there's that many different events to run in your localized area. And it makes it that much more fun when you're going out and building upon or winning or, losing doesn't matter. Just more time to get out there and drive the car on track in a competition format. So,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that pretty much left me with Grid Life. And the nice thing about Grid Life was there's a lot of tracks here in sort of the Midwest, Southeast that they run at. And the schedule sort of worked out. And as well as I thought that the car would be fairly competitive in Street GT. Really, I kind of looked at it and said, okay, I can get this M4. I can run it in Street GT. The modifications are fairly limited. I'm not going to have to spend a ton of money, and that's all relative.
yeah.
I've still dropped quite a lot of money into the car in terms of suspension, bolt-on modifications to the engine, safety, all sorts of stuff like that. But the nice thing was that Street GT and then also the tuner category in SCCA are quite similar, the most similar of the 3 organizations in terms of what I can run with, and so I said this will be good because I can still run SCCA Time Trial Nationals and be competitive in Tuner 2, which is the class I run in there, as well as if I want to go to any other SCCA events, I can do that, and I can easily fit the car into that class, which basically means I take the aero off the car, which is the wing and the front splitter, and then I've got to change out a couple suspension bits, and that's really it. Otherwise, the car fits.
So you have to
from
tell
that
us,
perspective.
how competitive has it been? What's the highest place you got so far?
Yeah, so it's well, it's not been as competitive as maybe as I'd like. Although I still think the car's I still think the car's capable, but I think that in terms of Grid Life Street GT, it's built to about 70% of the rule set.
Okay.
And
That's a
this is
big
really my
delta. Realistically, that's a big delta.
yeah,
I
it is.
mean,
Yeah.
in terms of like guys who generally win are guys that are usually set up to like 90% or better from a realistic
Yeah.
perspective, right?
Yeah. For sure.
So
Yeah.
if you're doing what you're expecting or doing above what you're expecting, I think that's right on par in my opinion of where you should be at based off of how you're built toward those rules. So
Yeah. Well, and one thing that I've done this year, especially for Grid Life, is so let me get let me get all my racer excuses ready here. So the really last year, I mean, the past couple years, Street GT's been really gaining momentum. I think last year was really one of the first years that like there was really a lot of competition, good competition in the class. And so you had Ito Waxman, who was running a C6 Z06 and is a very capable and fast driver. You've got Andy Vocals, who's running a C8 base Corvette. So that was
freaking
sort of
Corvettes,
interesting seeing.
Corvettes everywhere.
I know, right? So, and I have said this to the guys in the Street GT class. I like to refer to Street GT basically as Street GM is really what it should be because it's dominated by Corvettes and Camaros, and a lot of that is due to one big horsepower, especially out of the box, right? Like the Camaros and the Corvettes from the C6s forward all have very healthy horsepower numbers, and those are some of the only cars that you can buy that you can easily fit a 315 tire under. With
they allow
with like a
315?
yeah 315s.
Wow, for some
So
reason I thought that was limited to 285.
no, yeah 315.
Oh, man.
So I mean, so right when you're talking about that, I mean, you go to the
That's a
GM
very
catalog and figure out what car you
difficult
want to run.
thing to fit a
Yeah,
315 under just any old car. Now, I vaguely remember something about like them creating that class to get a lot of the guys that were trying to run Corvettes and stuff like that out of their
yeah,
like street class because it wasn't fair for street class,
yep,
and now you bump them into street GT and I mean, I'll touch on it really quickly. Sometimes I wonder, are we creating too many classes for too many things? And it's interesting because GTA has went completely other direction where it's like you're only going to give out 9 trophies, technically 12 trophies if you count the uh, what is it called? The experimental group.
max effort.
Yeah,
Are they calling it max effort now?
max
Yeah,
effort, yeah, and so they're giving out actually another 3 trophies, but it's one of those things where they've actually went the other direction, giving away less trophies. Where
yep,
back in the day used to be per drivetrain and per class, so they gave out way more trophies. But Grid Life kind of went one way, and then GTA kind of went the other way, which pro and cons to both, I think. I mean, we'll get more into it as we get into rule sets and the different organizations and the differences between and so on and so forth. But definitely one of those interesting topics that we can dive into and really get to understand, how many people are walking away
for
with a
sure.
trophy at the end of the day.
Oh yeah, for sure, absolutely, yeah. Well, I will say this: no trophies yet, no trophies so far this year, which is unfortunate. But I will say this, and whenever I go to an event, this is my own personal sort of view on things. The number one priority for me is to bring the car back in one piece. And I understand that, that may mean that I'm not quite as competitive because I'm not quite as willing to push the car to its absolute limit or beyond and then maybe rein it back a little bit, right? Like I tend to sneak up onto the limit of the car instead of being super aggressive going out and going over the limit and then trying to back it back down to figure out where that limit is. But to me, that's always a goal is I want to go to events and I want to have a car to be able to go to those events. And if I wreck the car, that's going to be a bit of a problem. But also, looking back this year, so I've also I'm going to be doing 6 events this year, maybe 7, at least 6 events this year. 5 of those 6 events that I'm doing are on a track that I have never been to, never turned a single lap. So that adds a bit more difficulty.
Yep.
As well as all the guys I will be competing against will have been on those tracks previously. And so I think one of the yardsticks that I've been measuring myself by, and I've actually been fairly happy with, is if you take my times from this year and you look at the times that the guys were running last year, I would be right up in the mix. I would probably be not, I'd be knocking on the door, if not podiuming in some of those races. If this was last year.
That's a good way to look at it because it is difficult when
this is my first year.
You've never been to, and to lay down the fastest lap that you could absolutely ever put down. It is enormously a difficult task. So, like you said, to be able to compare that to the guys who won last year, and then obviously you're having to do a little bit of research to understand, was that their first time there, and so on and so forth. But either which way, it's a good, like you said, yardstick of understanding where you are and where you need to go. And it is difficult because when you go to new tracks, some people are those people that just pick it right up and just, they can just learn a track in an instant. Other guys, they use that simulator like you have behind you and you rack it and just do practice sessions galore, but they still have to get to the track and still have to do 2, 3, 4 days preparation before they can get to that point of being able to really put down that heater lap. So I completely get what you're going. So being at tracks that I've never been to before and having to get up to speed, as well as the guys this year have at least a year or 2 of development on the car. So again, I'm also behind the curve there. So, so that's sort of been my mentality of, I know I'm playing catch up in this class, and there's 2 ways to catch up, which is one, throw a lot of money at the car and get caught up. Spend money and get caught up on the development curve, right? Like, that is definitely one way to do it. And I have thrown money at the car, and I've done things that I think are most important currently. But at the same time, there's still room. Like I said, I'm at like 70% of the rule set. I still need to go to a bigger tire. I'm currently only running a 295 tire. But I can go to a 315, but that is still a 315 on an 11-inch wheel, which is an undersized wheel for 315 versus Corvettes that are running 12-inch or 13-inch wheels, right? Same tire on a 12 or 13-inch wheel is pretty substantial. I can still get a little more power out of the car for sure. And I can still get a little more weight out of the car. So I think, right, that's what you do year after year is you sort of, you do some modifications, you go to tracks, you set your times, you see, what your competitors are doing, and then you figure out areas that you can improve. And so that's what these guys have been doing for the last, year or two. And so this is really my first year. I'm happy with the way I've driven it. And again, looking at where these guys were last year, which is sort of where I am this year, I would have been right in the mix. So what I'm hoping is that
the guys who are currently running Ito, Andy, Nick Hendricks. Last year there was a guy. Oh gosh, what's his name? I always refer to him as K Mag, like the Kyle Magnussen, like the F1 driver.
Yeah.
He's got a Porsche. And then there's been some other guys, Kevin and Christian. They're in Camaros, but again, right, like we should all in the next couple of years start to plateau out the performance of the cars, and I think sort of right at that point, am I on par with them? Which I think I should be. I think Ito in his C6 Z06 probably has maybe the highest potential,
Okay.
just in terms of how lightweight that car is from the factory. But again, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it that comes into it is the driver development program as well.
Yeah,
That's something
absolutely.
that I hate to say it, but in time attack in general, we seem to fail the driver development program portion of it at the highest point because as what I've seen, the more badass you make your car, the less you get to drive it. And since you get to drive the car less and less and less over time, it turns into this whole situation where you don't get to actually go on track and get the car situated to the way that you want it to be. And it really leads to that deficit where if you get that guy who has made his car reliable enough, and I say this in a weird context because from a realistic perspective, from a very realistic perspective, time attack cars are not supposed to be reliable. And I know that is very like oxymoron of everything that
Yeah.
is what it is, but time attack in general is very give me all the power, right? You start the weekend off on the lower boost settings. You know, Jackie Ding is like one of my favorite people when it comes to like his videos because he'll absolutely say like, okay, we're on low boost. We're going to go out and turn some laps. Da, da, da. Okay, now we're going to turn it up. Now we're going to turn it up all the way. You know, that whole
Yeah.
situation. And
And
that
I don't
is,
I don't think people appreciate how hard that is. I've now, and I know you have also had that opportunity now, especially with turbo cars, right? Like it is not easy to do it
yep.
in a naturally aspirated car, but when you have that turbo, right, like you can just start turning it up, and like it is not as easy as you think. Now, granted, the difference between 700 horsepower and 800 horsepower is not as much of a difference as 300 horsepower and 400 horsepower, but still, like it is not easy when you've been driving a track and you've learned all of your markers and all of your speeds at a certain level, and now you're going to turn that up. I don't think people necessarily appreciate how hard that is. It's more difficult than you think.
Yeah, I completely agree. One of my favorite things in the world was when I had my Subaru. The Spec Miata guys would always blah blah blah, this that and the other. Their mouths were always running about how they could hop in the car and go faster because they're such a better driver. I'm like, cool, you drove that 150 horsepower car really fast, and I'm not taking away from it. It's really fast, but driving a 150 horsepower car is starkly different to driving a big aero 800 horsepower car, incredibly different car to drive, and the thinking times go down to nothing, and you just have to figure things out in such an appreciable amount, small amount of time that it's crazy.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
but
absolutely.
yeah, so I mean, so I'll jump into me a little bit. So
I
obviously,
want to hear about this Subaru you've got.
yeah, had big
The world,
words of
the world.
had.
Okay, the world famous Subaru you had.
So big thing for me was I bought this car brand new. Technically, the second Subaru I bought a 2005. Ended up rolling it. Weird situation, weird story. Doesn't matter. End up getting a 2006 Subaru STI. And I had that before that. I had a Honda Civic, and it was just a four-door Honda Civic, like basically the ugliest thing you could imagine, box. But it was my Honda Civic. I did drag racing, long time, and I was having a good time. LACR was down the street. Me and my buddies were going there every Wednesday and Friday. And then I really started going to this shop called Eastside Muffler. My buddy there now, Joe, and his brother Gabe, they're big influence into what I would later do. Joe kept saying, "Go to the racetrack, go to Willow Springs, go to this, go turn a corner." Eventually, when I got the STI, I said, well, I bought an STI. It's made to turn. I should go do that. Obviously, that was before I tried drag racing and blew all but one motor mount. But, it's still fun in that way either way. Got to the track, started having fun. I did a race school to start it all off. Had a good time with that. Did that. Started going to the track as much as I could afford. Ended up hooking up with an organization and said, like, hey, man, I'll take out the trash. Like, I'll do anything you need me to do to get free track time. Which was awesome because at that juncture, I got to meet up with awesome people like Amir Bentatu, and I ended up meeting a good friend of mine, Rob Campbell, Ken Kazitz, all these guys. And, this a very interesting guy. You might have seen him on the internet. He waves some flags really, really fast and says a bunch of mocking terms about every kind of car you could imagine. Doug. So it was a really cool situation for me. I got to go out to the track, got to run the track as much as I possibly could, which, if I remember correctly, it was something like 50 some odd events in 1 year. And with that, I got to go out on track with a bunch of cool instructors, people like Amir. Like I got them to hop in the car with me. I got to hop in the car with them. So I got their experience. They got my experience. We all got to push into each other. I believe fully like that advanced my driving in a short period of time exponentially, without a doubt. And just started doing basically just track days. Super fun, having a good time with it. Then they started doing this thing called all-wheel drive competition. Okay, sounds great to me. Started doing those a little bit. Got a little like, oh, this is really fun. Like you said, you're yard sticking against somebody else. You're saying, hey, I'm faster than you. I'm slower than you. I need to go better. I need to go better, bigger, whatever. I need to modify my car. So rolls around, super lap battle, Buttonwillow, now called finals. So they had
When
an
did that
event.
start?
Oh, I wish I knew when it actually started.
I'm putting you on the spot.
I wish I knew when it actually started.
Okay.
I think it was like, don't quote me, but I want to say like early 2000s, probably like 2003 or 4. Could be wrong. Jason obviously knows, and we'll have him on the show. We'll talk to him about it. He worked at Super Street at the time. But I ended up in a cool situation where Joe, he used to run in Super Street, in Super Lap Battle, in his Evo. So and he had a history of time attack, right? So he'd been doing this, and it kind of turned into a situation where he's like, hey, you should run in this. And I'm like, I don't know how to do it. That's a big leap. That's a big show. But with his help, he actually came with me, crewed for me. And dude, I went with a 2006 STI on lowering springs. Literally like lowering springs and like 297 wheel horsepower with like, Cobb stage 2 tune type situation. And you know what? I had a freaking blast. And my claim to fame there is I actually got to beat Bucky Lassick. He was there in his Subaru at the time.
Oh, boy.
And so I beat him, and I think I ended up finishing like 4th place, just off the podium on my very first event. I still have the poster, or not poster, I made a poster thing of the cover of the fold out of Super Street Magazine, where I got to be like front and center. I positioned my car front and center in like the big grid of cars that they took a picture of. My stock ass STI sitting there looking all bland and boring with all the time attack cars. But that was a huge motivator. No livery. No, actually, I did have Eastside muffler on the side of the car, so I technically had a livery. But one of those situations where a huge motivating factor at that juncture, right? So when you're just off, the podium or just off, glory per se, that's an instant like, I could have done this. I was there. So that was in November, and the next time attack season was just starting up, and I was like, going full bore. I'm going to do this. I said, I'm going all out. And turned out a friend of mine, John Carson, who had an Evo at the time, he kind of was in the same boat where he's like, I'm going to start time attacking. And me and him turned an awesome rivalry into like, let's spend our entire living wage on our cars and do everything possible to make our cars bigger, faster, better. And essentially, I went through the next couple of years just massively evolving the car every event. Like one event, I showed up with a wing. Next event, I show up with a bigger splitter. Next event, I show up gutting the back out of the car. Next event, I got new wheels. Like every event, something new, new turbo. Like every event.
Where were you running a lot of these events? Like what tracks were you running?
All Southern California. We're talking Buttonwillow Auto Club Speedway, the infield of Auto Club, Roval Auto Club, infield Auto Club, Chuckwalla, Willow Springs, Streets, Big, all the standard SoCal tracks, which made it great. And that's where, going back to what you were talking about before, like you're traveling quite long distances to go to all these different tracks. Where for me, like I live 5 minutes away from Willow Springs, right? And Buttonwillow, an hour and a half, and Auto Club isn't that far. Chuckwall's kind of far. But for the most part, like going to these tracks was actually quite easy. So then I kind of started picking up pace, right? So I ended up picking up some sponsors, getting Unisport involved, obviously a huge Southern California tuner, and really just started amplifying everything that I was doing. And, I can never say enough about Paul from Unisport, both the owner, Paul, and the now owner, Paul, where, that man, the now owner, Paul, that man stayed up like a billion hours into the late night, early morning, into the revolving door of everything, working on my car, just putting in all the effort to get everything accomplished. So absolutely amazing to see what that guy could do and how he could do it. And he kind of treated it as the engineering task. He wanted to see how fast he could build a car, how well he could build a car to go around the racetrack, which was awesome. And the first year, when we went out and actually went full bore in competition, we broke 3 records. So breaking 3 records. Now, granted, I will completely say this. I would love to completely take credit as a driver and being like, yeah, all me, baby. But not a chance. Like the records and the rules that were set from the previous guys back in those days, from a realistic perspective, you're talking about a series that had been kind of dead for a while and got brought back to life. Tire technology changed exponentially. Technology as a whole, changed. So for me to set those records, I hate to say it, but I think any of those guys from back in the day would have set those records just the same, just simply because the technology shift. But from there, we went into the next season and we just said, let's go. We're going to go. And we brought the car to the next level of its maturity. I'll just jump into the final year of street class maturity, which was at 550 wheel horsepower. Because I will say this,
Subaru.
Yeah, we set a bunch of records at 427 horsepower because one of the like you have to do with Grid Life, they set rule sets up where the turbos had to be a specific inducer size to limit horsepower. So they actually created horsepower limits within, at the time, Redline Time Attack, which really, capped you on what you're able to accomplish. And we still set records at that. They ended up changing the rule a year later. So then we went to a 550 wheel horsepower setup. And essentially all the records that we broke from the previous year, we broke every single record from every track that we went to, every time we went there, except for Road Atlanta, and those dirty professional awesome guys could not get Dan O'Donnell's time at Road Atlanta. And I give him massive amounts of props and credit, because that's actually one of the very few people where it was he was on an RS3 tire, I was on an RS3, probably similar horsepower and yada, yada, yada. And they just drove us, outran us, outdid everything. They weren't at the event, but we were trying to break the record from his previous attempt there. But that's basically the only track that I went to that year where we didn't immediately set a record. So that's kind of my claim to fame there, is we went into street class and just demolished everything for a couple of years. So we made the move. We're we're going to go to limited class and we moved to limited class. In our move to limited class, GTA changed its rule sets. So we built a car that was heavily reliant on flat bottoms, and now flat bottoms are gone.
Yeah.
So we said
Oof.
we have choices. Do we cut it out and get rid of it, or screw it, just go to unlimited? So that's what we did. We just said screw it. We went to unlimited and started participating in that. We ran 1 or 2 events in limited class. Set a record at like Big Willow, and then got instantly moved up to unlimited class. Had good times in unlimited class, I will say. Obviously, unlimited class, a brutal class to be in, and probably one of my most fun events I've ever been to. Again, which I'm not a huge fan of Road Atlanta as a whole, but one of the most fun events I've ever been to was at Road Atlanta, because one of the hardest things to do is get all the unlimited class players to come to the track. Hardest thing in the world to do, right? And for this event, you had a bunch of really awesome competitors at the event. So you had Tony from UMS Tuning, you had the GS Mike from GST, and you had the Life guys, as well as, I can't remember the guy's name, but he's a guy that had a GTR back in the day. And he was out there going wicked fast. And, I'm just going to say this. It was one of the most fun events ever, just because a bunch of unlimited class cars going really, really fast. Leading, at the end of the first day, we were actually number one, leading these freaking crazy cars that we just like couldn't believe that we were in charge, in the number one spot of. But we shot our silver bullet already. We used our new tires. We did everything we could. They all came out the second day and just kept improving. Our first place finish led to a 4th place finish at the end of the event, which I should have been able to pull out a 3rd place finish. Should have at least been able to pull that out. Couldn't do it. Driver error on my part. Turn 1, I could not get that thing right on the second day, and I muffed it. So it is what it is. That was a brutal event, though, where I talked about it at the GTA event at Coda, where literally we're trying to prep this car and get this car ready for this event, and it was just a monstrous task of trying to get everything done, where we just couldn't get it done in time. We were 24 hours late leaving, driving it all the way there, getting it there, having to unload the car, and then essentially, have to unload the car and still prep the car so we could go. Brutal event, but one of the most fun events of all time. And then kind of to cap it all off, 2016, that same year, we did very well. We set records at Streets of Willow and a couple other little things in unlimited class, and set the unlimited class record for all-wheel drive category at Big Willow, which huge achievement in my opinion, at a 118. That's just such a blisteringly hardcore fast time at that track.
Wow.
But definitely one of those things where proud moment at the end of the year. We were able to go to Super Lap Battle at that time, or final, GTA Finals they call it now, and take home the overall victory, barely eking it out against Steven Racing, who had a Huracan or something like that, GT3 prep car with a whole team and a whole professional team and stuff like that. And we were able to eke that out and get the win there. Ran a 141, again, a really crowning achievement at Button Willow there, which still to this day,
that's still a fast time.
Yeah, it is still a fast time today. And one thing that irks me more than anything is Super Street, I think it was, put out a whole article on fast times at Button Willow. Omitted my time. Just didn't even get in there. I was like, man, that's brutal.
That
right
hurts.
there.
That hurts. Yeah.
Kind of the other claim to fame for the GTA and Super Lap Battle stuff is I was the only the second privateer to win the event. Usually it was always a shop car per se. Cody Keschel actually won it in a Corvette a couple years earlier, and then I did it for the second time, in 2016. After that, man, we kept trying to work the Subaru in, kept trying to go faster. Everything we did led to terrible. Kept blowing motors up. I mean, we were doing test laps at Big Willow, excuse me, in preparation for like the first year at Coda or second year at Coda that they went. And I mean, we're running this on 500 wheel horsepower. It's like 550, something like that. Low horsepower. Like this should be like nothing. We're cruising around the track doing like 21s and 22s, just easy laps for the most part. Car blows up, shoots a rod out. So it's just one of those things where everything we did from that point on just didn't work out. And we went to finals the final year where I went out on my warm-up lap and the motor blew up. Didn't even make it the to the fast lap. And the year before that, we went out and on the initial fast lap, the motor blew up. It's just, we were struggling really hard with keeping the motor together and keeping it right. And eventually I just got to the point of I had spent so much money, so much time, so much energy. And I couldn't bear to continue with that. So I called it. And now I have my Mustang. I had a Miata for a little bit that I used that as my practice car because with an 800 horsepower Subaru, kind of hard to keep that as a practice car. So I had my Miata as my practice car, which very akin to your E30 in terms of horsepower. A little bit less, but still the same. Lightweight, fun. Go out there, beat around in it, have a good time. But that was my time attack experience, and I got to, in my opinion, I got in like the perfect time where time attack was really gaining momentum again. GTA was doing pro-am events, so it gave me a lot of events to go to. Redline was doing a lot of events as well. So like I said, I was doing 10, 12 events a year in time attack formats. I got to really like hone my skills as a time attack driver, which I will tell you right now, that's one of my biggest complaints of all the drivers that we currently have in time attack today. I feel like no one understands the strategy of time attack. Everyone's just out there like just trying to drive a lap. And I used to go out and do so much coordination before my lap. I'd go out and talk to the guy in front of me and the guy behind me. Hey, what's your strategy? Are you gonna how many warm-up laps are you gonna do? How many hot laps are you gonna do? How many cool-down laps and I feel like none of that is accomplished anymore. So people just going out there and then they come back and they're all upset about traffic and sorry, going off on a rant, but we'll get into strategy of time attack at a later date as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But
another episode coming
exactly. Soon. But that's my big thing is I went out, I put a lot of effort into the Subaru. I put every last dollar I had into that thing. I mean, as you can see behind me, I have a couple trophies. I have a couple of, season championships. I set like 16 or some odd records throughout my time attack career. I really enjoyed the family of time attack. I enjoyed the overall like being there. One thing I always loved about time attack was just the ability to go there. And, I'm a preparer. It's just how I am. So my trailer is full of AN fittings and anything Subaru related, I had it. So when a lower level class guy would come in and he'd be like, hey, do you have a X? I'd be like, yep. And obviously to some degree you're like, just take it, man, go do it, get your car back out there. Obviously if you're starting to talk about like brand new parts that are hundreds of dollars, compensation needed. But for the most part, it's like, sure. I mean, simple stuff. Like even when we went to Coda, I had my trailer and, guys, Jesse came over and he needed parts for his S2000. He needed AN fittings and stuff. I'm like, I got AN fittings in line in the trailer. Just go grab it, take what you need, go for it. Like get your car back on track and get it going. Right. That's what the time attack mantra is. It's you want everybody to go out and don't get me wrong. The competitive juices are definitely flowing there and you want to go out and beat everybody, but you also want to beat everybody at their best. Right. Like the old, driver saying in the book is always like, "Oh, I was on low boost, or I was on used tires. I did this and I did
Yeah.
that." And there's always an excuse galore. Like, there's always excuses. The famous GST line was always like, we did that record on low boost because as soon as you put it on high boost, the damn thing blows up. So, and I can relate to that. So, but it's definitely one of those situations where that's the glory of Time Attack to me, is getting out there, helping each other, and not only helping each other out with cars but with driving. I mean, me and my buddy Ken, he was driving his car in Time Attack as an enthusiast class car while I was driving it in street class, and my other buddy Rob was driving his car in limited class, and we'd all put our data together in our videos and we'd watch them and go,
Yep.
hey, where can I improve, what can I do, yada yada yada. And we'd all just go faster and do better. And Ken would help me if my car was broke, and Ken might let me touch his car because I wasn't a very good mechanic in that sense, but maybe sometimes. But for the most part, guys were all hands on deck and everybody's helping each other out. I mean, I know, like watching Tony, he's competing against guys. At the same time, he's also like tuning the next guy's car, helping him get the car running right so he can actually go out on track. And then the great and terrible thing for Tony would be like, hey, I just tuned that guy's car. Now he just had a lap time that beat mine.
Yeah. I mean, for sure. But like you said, it's not, you don't want to, it's just not as fulfilling when everybody's having problems, everybody's having trouble, and you can set a fast lap and then you beat everybody by like 6 seconds. And it's because, well, you just kind of sat in your pit and didn't talk to anybody and you didn't want to help anybody and they were all, like struggling or whatever, right? Like, it's just,
What's the point
better
of for that? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of people who really enjoy it want to do it, and they want to do it in the most fulfilling way possible, which is to have everybody running, at least getting in 1 or 2 quick laps, right? More than willing to help you out, and hopefully you can get the car back out there, versus like just sitting around and being like, well, sucks to be you, let me go put my helmet on because I got to go get out there, right? Like, I mean, that's just not as much fun. And I don't think, for most people, it's not as rewarding. And also what you said, right? Like, I still think in many ways it still goes on, which is people in the same class sharing data, which has only gotten exponentially easier these days with all of the data systems, which will be coming up on a future episode. I'm sure we'll be talking about that, later.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, now, we were just doing this the other day in Street GT. We were looking at, we were just comparing. So we had been at Mid-Ohio, and we were comparing the speed curves between a C6 Z06 versus my M4 versus a Camaro SS1LE, right? Like, knowing sort of, okay, the various weights of the cars, the horsepower-ish of the cars. I've never dynoed my cars. I don't know what it is, but I've got sort of an estimate. Like, it was interesting seeing the speed curves, as well as the minimum speed of everybody, like coming out of the turn at Mid-Ohio, and it was a fairly long straight, right? So I think the Z06 was hitting like 153, I think, like, was its peak speed. My peak speed was a 147, and the SS1LE, which was completely stock, was like 143, I think it was. I think it was like 10 miles an hour down on the C6 Z06. And I was sort of in the middle, with a tuned twin turbo, inline 6. But it's just interesting to be able to kind of see that stuff, and you can compare. And in some ways, we did sort of, we looked at some other portions, and you can kind of see like, oh, like, so, somebody's doing something different here. What are you doing? Or like, what line are you taking through this? And maybe it helps, maybe it doesn't. Depends on your car. Depends on your setup. What tires are you running? But it's at least interesting to be able to see and compare and talk with your other competitors and see what they're doing. Maybe what they're doing can help you, maybe not.
Yeah.
But in a lot of times, I feel like people are willing to talk to you and help. But at the same time, I also know that there are other people who they generally don't share data.
I mean, there's always going to be
They've had
that
to figure it
competitive
out.
point where you're
Yeah,
gonna hold back a little bit because, like,
sure.
I'm probably gonna go back to this over and over again through our conversations, but like myself and John Carson at one point we're sharing data and talking how to do better lines and this, that, and the other, and we're all buddy having a good time. As the competition really started driving down this wedge, it got to the point where it was like, I'm not sharing anything with you. I'm not giving you any. What tire pressure you're on? Don't know. It just, it definitely can get you. And
Sure.
I think, it took quite a bit of time for us to kind of get out of that mode. But it was tough. We were fierce competitors going after each other every event, and we were facing off not only in one, like we were facing off with Redline, with GTA, and with all-wheel drive competition. We had three different competitions going, facing off each other. And in a weird, crazy way, like I got kind of lucky, where like the all-wheel drive competition might happen on a Saturday, and then the time attack happened on Sunday. And sometimes he would have me on Saturday, but I would eventually get him on the Sunday. So it always kind of worked out well for me because the time attack was being promoted in a much higher light. So for me, it kind of
Right.
worked out. But yeah, it was something that we were constantly battling back and forth on, and just going after each other. But
So
so
what are your goals for this the Mustang that you got now?
Mustang
What do
is
you want to do with that?
pure and simple. Like alls it is just a car to have fun with. I can take to the track. I can drive to work. I've consistently told people it is a legitimate street car. I want to make it so that I can drive it around. I don't want it too loud. I don't want it too low. I don't want it too annoying. I just want to make it so that I can drive it, have fun with it. I'm doing a lot of like driver instruction recently. I go to the track. I have fun with what I want to have fun with, but for the most part, like I actually just sold my Miata just because I wasn't driving it enough. I kind of got to the point where I felt like I can get just as much entertainment and fun out of just driving the Mustang. Because I kept going to the thing where I'd be like, oh, I'm going to go to this track event. Should I drive the Miata or should I drive the Mustang? And I continually just reach for the keys for the Mustang. So I got to that point and I said, you know what? I'm just going to get rid of the Miata, stay with the Mustang, do that. I'm not going to lie. I do have, through coaching of Porsche guys, I have an immense desire to buy a Porsche, but it's out of my price range at the moment. It's going to be a lot of saving up, a lot of getting it there, but maybe one day I'll be able to pick one up and do the thing. But still, like that's a car where I don't know if I particularly have the coin in my pocket to be like this is a pure track car. Like that doesn't make
Yeah.
sense to me. It would be more of a just dual purpose, like fun, and like you said, right? When you have that thought in the back of your head all the time of like, if this something goes wrong here, I can't replace this. You're never going to be able to push to that like extreme limit where like I got lucky in the sense that I do have a little bit of a flick of a switch in my head where like with my Subaru, once I got it into like race car mode, which would probably be like 20 at the end of 2013, I just always thought of it as a race car, and if it something happened to it, something happened to it. I probably always held back. I probably did, but I always like to think of it as something where like I was able to just drive as physically as possible as I probably possibly could. And the funny part is, to me at least, I look back at my driving from those years, and I go, "Oh my God, this is so terrible." Like I look at the driving back
Yeah.
then, and I go, "I could drive that car so much faster now than I could then." But I'll also say this: youthful ignorance is a gleeful thing, right? To be able to just
Yeah.
drive in insane speeds and do insane things without any thought of repercussions is something that is absolutely insane. And now I look and I go, I have a son. I have responsibilities. I have a lot of things where if something happens to me, this is really bad. Where back then I started to have those things, but I just was able to tune those out really easily. And that's where like
Oh, for sure.
some of my students and stuff like that now, James, can easily do those things. And he just, the no fucks giving attitude of just like, don't care. I can just, I'll fix the car later. It'll be okay type attitude. And I just think that that's one of those situations where like it's harder now. And so it's much easier for me to be reserved a little bit more, pull it back to even like an 80%. Because, I mean, there's going to be times where, like, and I've definitely had those experiences where, like, you're coaching somebody or you're showing somebody something, and they're, like, kind of giving you that attitude of, like, well, I could go faster. This is whatever. And I'm like, well, I'm not trying to go as fast as I possibly can. I'm trying to teach you. I'm trying to, show you. And then it's like, okay, I'll push to, like, a 90% lap, and they'll be like, oh, this is what I'm talking about. I'm like, yeah, and they're still in reserve because this isn't my car. This isn't something that, you're still in the car with me. Like, I'm still reserving because I can't afford to replace your car, and I don't want to replace your car. So,
right.
But
absolutely.
I'm just going to say this. I think that's a good introduction to the Kilgore and Jager show, our Time Attack podcast, Perfect Lap podcast for time attackers. It's here. We're going to be talking time attack as much as we possibly can. We're hoping to bring this to you on a regular basis. If you have any things that you want us to talk about, if you want to be a guest on the show, throw it at us, comment on it, message us, do whatever you need to do, get in touch with us. We're glad to explore any topics related to time attack. Believe me, we have a lot. There's a lot of things pertaining to tires, to rule sets, to organizations, everything under the sun. We're going to talk to different time attack drivers. We're going to talk about the different events that are going on, what's projected to go on, and really we just want to talk anything and everything time attack. We want to get excited about it. We are excited about it. So Kilgore and I, we're ready to go. He's got the Midwest/East Coast. I got the West Coast. We will have a very eclectic view of what time attack is, with our difference in how we kind of came up in the time attack world. And, Kilgore is actually still going out there and he's still competing. So he gets that firsthand, what's going on at the events and how the different participants are actually, getting it done. Myself, I'm not competing in time attack anymore, but I am going to events. You might see me doing some driver interviews for GTA. You might see me at some other events, as you might see, but you'll see us out there. Just come say hi to us. Give us your ideas. Give us your information. We'd love to talk about it and get it done. All right, Kilgore, what else you got for us before we close this out?
So let's talk a little bit about where you can find us going forward. We'll be on Spotify and Apple Podcast. You can look for us, as you've already found us, if you're listening to this, under Perfect Lap Podcast. So, be sure, bookmark that. We are hoping to be putting out regular we're hoping to be putting out regular podcasts as well as video casts. So we hope you guys enjoy everything that we're talking about. You will also be able to find us on YouTube. You can look up Perfect Lap Podcast. We'll be putting out the video portions of this as well. So you can, if you want to watch me and Jager talk about stuff and have a little bit more, we'll throw in some pictures and kind of show you some of the things that we're talking about. You can find us on YouTube, Perfect Lap Podcast as well. And again, yes, as Jager said, hit us up. Let us know what topics you're interested in. Let us know what we got right. Let us know what we got wrong. And we will be sure to say our piece with you. And then let's have some commentary. Let's see what you guys think. I know that Jager and I are not the only ones who enjoy time attack, and who we're not the only ones who have opinions on what time attack is or what time attack cars are. Let us know if you think Without a Livery is a time attack car and actually a time attack car. All right, we want to know. These are things we want to know. So that's where you can find us, and we look forward to talking with you and seeing what you think of the show.
All right, guys. You guys have a good one. We'll see you on the next one.